Yes?
I think this may just be because it's been a while, but I seem to recall that death was also one of the punishments.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
You see, the problem is that toward the end, I started rushing it. So let me answer that. So the answer, sort of the complete answer, is that when God told Adam not to eat from the tree, he says that if you eat, you will surely die. And when the snake discusses it with Eve, the snake says, oh no, you are not going to die, but you will be like God, knowing good and evil, knowing everything. And then, amazingly enough, they don't die right away. So if we go to the end of the chapter 3, there is another amazing words. Thank you. That was such a wonderful question because it allows me to. So they're wonderful words because what God says, he says, they're still in paradise, in Eden. Don't use word paradise, I just did. Paradise is a later Persian word which should not be used in this context. But so they're still in Eden, and God says, now they will eat from the tree of life and be like us. He's addressing the heavenly court. So we will have to send them out. So the death will come. And the death, of course, comes, I was planning to talk about in the 4th chapter, Cain and Abel. That's when death comes. The death does not come to Adam and Eve. They come in a terrible way of a fratricidal event at the very beginning of our history. So, in many respects, it's a wonderful thing because all these patriarchs are going to live long time intersecting with each other. So Adam lives till Noah is bored. That far away, right? So it's, he doesn't see the flood, but sort of almost, right? So in spite of these terrible things which they did, in spite of the punishment, they still have this unbelievable longevity. They live for hundreds and hundreds of years, except one mysterious figure called Enoch, who lives exactly 356 years. But he walks with God, and then he is no more. These are these mysterious words which indicate that his disappearance might be not just death. Right? But it's a book full of wonderful things. It's all in there, for little investment. You could learn all these wonderful stories. Yes? Was he a monotheist? Okay. There was one pharaoh who established a worship of sun as the dominant religion in Egypt for a while. He was single theist. He was not monotheist. I said Jews believed that their God, their tribal God, created everything. That's the difference. The notion of God, the creator, does not appear before the Jews. Right? So, yes, there was an attempt to sort of, and when people look, there sort of a theory which not very plausible, that the original religion of humans was monotheism. Because if you analyze, go and talk to different tribes, and analyze, they all have this notion of the God who is the ultimate God. For example, when you go and talk to ancient Babylonians, they're all dead, but I mean, they have this head god, the top god called El. How interesting. But they actually don't worship him. No, it's the Marduk whom they worship, who sort of it's a funny thing, sort of think about it. Greeks, they have this notion of ancient proto-first God. But it's, yes, but it disappears. I mean, the first God is never on the place. It's the usually, like Marduk was a god of storm. So he takes precedence. He's like Jupiter with what are the bolts, thunder, lightning bolts. Right? So they displace the original. There's some ancient god, but nobody prays to him. You know? It's like, okay, Hindu religion. Of course, everybody knows about Brahma. It's Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. How many temples to Brahma are there in India? Well, some people say one. I mean, every village has a temple to Vishnu, temple to Shiva. But the Brahma, the first principle, is hidden. He is not worshipped. Am I correct? Right? So when we look, what appears to be that sort of most people do have some notion of the primary God, but it's far, far back and quickly disappears. And I'm not actually even so certain as these people who maintain primitive monotheism being the thing. The Jews are more interesting because think about it. It's a small tribe. They have a tribal God. They, if we are to believe the Bible, they don't even know the name of the God. The name is revealed to Moses in the bush. Right? They don't know. They know they worship the God of our fathers. You know, we had these ancestors. Whatever they had, the tribal God, he told them he will give them land, we follow. Right? Then the name is revealed, and then they make this unbelievable jump. They say, our tribal God is not just a tribal God. He is the universal God. Yes?
So there are two words mentioned in God, Lord and God. It's just
Elohim, Yahweh.
Adonai. I mean, in this.
In this is specifically Yahweh. Let me assure you. In the second and third chapter of Genesis, when it says, Lord God, there is the amazing, this is the only place in the Bible where it appears, where both of the names appear adjacent. And totally inexplicably, it says Yahweh Elohim, which means Yahweh God. It's very strange, but that's what it is. You know, I do have Hebrew Bible in my room, so there are multiple words the Bible uses for God. It's Adonai. It's Al Shaddai, it's, you know. By the way, the modern Hebrews will never say Yahweh. This is unpronounceable, ineffable name, which is written there. Consonants are written, but vowels disappeared. Vowels of Adonai are written there. Modern Orthodox Jews would say Hashem, the name. So what is the name? The name is the name. Sort of you. But they would write the 4 letters, but they would not vocalize them. Right. Okay, so when you read any Christian Bible, so most of the Bibles, if you see Lord printed with capital L and then semi-capital O-R-D, like that. Like, look at the piece of paper I gave you. That means Yahweh. Okay? If it's just Lord with lowercase, I mean, with upper L case, but the rest lowercase, it most likely Adonai. Right? You say Adonai for both if you are a religious Jew. Reading it in Hebrew, yes. Sort of the name of God should not be pronounced by religious Jews.
So the English word Lord refers to the name of God.
The English word Lord, when it's spelled the way like that, then it refers to Yahweh. In American Standard Version of the Bible, which was sort of done by American scholars in 1901, they decided, and I quote, we should no longer abide by the Jewish superstition. I'm quoting, so please do not send anything to HR, to abide by Jewish superstition, and will put the name of God in the. However, they put the name Jehovah because they didn't quite know how it was actually pronounced. So while restoring the name, they made a terrible mistake. They combined 4 correct consonants with Adonai vocalization, and they got who knows what. So when you talk like Jehovah Witnesses, this is where it goes. Right? So then, when in 1946, the mainline Protestant churches decided to come up with this translation, the one I recommend, Revised Standard Version, they decided to abandon this practice and to use word Lord with all caps, even if the caps are small, to indicate the divine name was used. Okay? Now, do you want to know more? I could go for hours today. So it's a hard thing, right? So if you look at the translations of the Bible done by Haredim, by highly religious Jews in United States, they would actually put in place of the name, they would put the English word Hoshem, which is actually not an English word. So that's how you know where the original name was. If you are dealing with less literalist Jews, for example, in the translation of Jewish Publication Society, they follow the convention of Christian Bibles by using the Lord with all caps. Right? The Jewish Bible, which I would recommend is Oxford Jewish Study Bible 2nd edition, which I think possesses very balanced and good commentaries. But this, your Hasidic friends would not approve of my recommendation. And they would recommend Art Scroll Tanakh. Jews, you see, Jews don't, okay. Some Jews do not mind using the word Bible. But it's a Greek word. You realize that, huh? Okay, now you realize that. which actually means Biblia or Vivlia in modern Greek, which means books. It's not one book.
It's crown.
What?
Crown. Kettle. Crown.
Yes, but Tanakh. Here they say Tanakh.
Today, but the word that was used was kettle, which is crown.
That I didn't know. Okay. So now they use Tanakh, which stands for Torah, Nevi'im and Ketuvim. So the prophets and the writings and the abbreviation. But so if you want to use a very conservative or Haridim, if you know the word, the highly orthodox Jewish translation, it's Art Scroll Tanakh, which tends to be actually paraphrased often. They sort of, whatever, both everything. If you read the stories, the same stories appear in all the translations. So I mean, the goal should be, it's like what I said with Homer. I don't care which translation you read the story, know what happened. The same here. I mean, I recommend one translation because I think, and it's standard again, when I recommended this Oxford Annotated Bible with Apocrypha, Will immediately said, oh, they asked me at Brown to use it, right? Georgetown, whatever, yes.
There's no Bible stuff at Brown, I'm sure.
I'm sure there is.
Maybe.
Every university has Bible's literature.
Well, but the Jesuits required it.
Okay, they're not required, but you could take it at Stanford, you could take it at Harvard. So, but, you know, this is a commonly recommended Bible in university setting. Plus, it is a really awfully good translation. You know, it's not perfect. No translation could be perfect, but it's the best compromise.
Except the 70s.
Except?
The 70?
The 17th translation is what? Okay. Translation of the 70 is wonderful. It's central translation in some sense for Christians, for an obvious reason, because that was the translation used by the apostles. Vulgate translation by St. Jerome, of course, was used through the West, and it's an awfully good translation. No translation. However, let me repeat, no translation is perfect. Jerome was a great translator, maybe the greatest ever as an individual translator. No translator is perfect.
I just meant they thought it was perfect.
Nobody ever thought it was perfect. Well, some apocryphal Jewish writing of the 2nd century BC thought it was perfect. But, no, I mean, this is why. Think about it. For example, when 4th century, you know, Christians in Rome start realizing that their Bible, called Itala, ancient Latin translation, is not perfect because it just doesn't sound right in Latin. So Jerome decides to get a commission from the Pope to translate the Bible and starts translating, but makes an absolutely sort of unprecedented decision that instead of translating from Septuagint, to translate from the Hebrew. So he goes to Palestine, finds some rabbi who teaches Hebrew. Nobody knows Hebrew at that point, I mean, among the Christian. So he learns Hebrew, becomes the first person in many, many centuries who actually fluent, and translates the Bible. Beautiful translation. But immediate reaction from all over was, oh, this is an awful thing. I mean, how did you do it? I mean, who is the main opponent? Augustine. I don't know what you know, but St. Augustine is a very major figure in the Western Church. So he thinks it's unacceptable. We have to go and use our traditional text. And if we are to translate it, it has to follow Septuagint. Guess what? Augustine loses. Except for the Psalter. Psalter, there's a book of Psalms. Right? So the Christian Bible in the West for the next, who could do arithmetic, 1,200 years, is Hebrew-based. It's not Septuagint-based. But is it perfect translation? No. No, I mean, in some sense, even Masoretic text, when it becomes codified, I'm going to say terrible. It's not perfect, actually. It has places where Hebrew is incomprehensible and cannot be translated. So you have to go to Septuagint and see what it says. Example, my famous passage is there's this Hebrew at the end of book of Genesis. There's a story of Joseph. And Jacob gives his favorite son, Joseph. It's a very bad idea to have favorite sons, but favorite son, Joseph, he gives him a coat in Greek. Nobody knows what the Hebrew says. When they translate Hebrew, the best they could come up with is coat with long sleeves, which is not what Hebrew says, but nobody knows what Hebrew says. So the coat of many colors comes from Septuagint. Right? So I'm not claiming inferiority of Masoretic text. I claim gaps. I mean, we're talking about thousands of years of transmission. The language again, they're all kind of people nowadays, like Asaf saying, oh, I speak fluent Hebrew. Maybe not quite the same as 2,500 years ago.
No, even when you read the Bible in Hebrew today, some words they don't know what is the meaning of. Like there is the word shunra, which they think means cat, but...
Well, with animals, vegetables, and things like that, it's very complicated. Because mapping is very, yes. So we are looking. So what do? Revised Standard Version. This is my simple recommendation. There is a reliable version. Will you know every shade of meaning? No. But no matter what you do, you will not know every shade of meaning. By the way, is it true about the Bible? No, it's true about Homer. It's true about Dickens. It's true about any book. We have to live in this imperfect world where we sort of try to understand the meaning of texts. What I recommend, read the text in translation. I even threw away large portions. I threw away books. Some of you might notice there are 2 books missing from the 2.
Leviticus and Deuteronomy.
Yeah, lots. This is like, lots of people will be upset, but I say, eventually, first study this. Read this, there's a story there. Compelling story, wonderful story. Yes?
So I just, if you know, the symbolism of those flowing cloth over here, looks like an inverted Russian flag.
Yeah, well, except this is clothing worn by Seraph. Seraph is this angelic being which suddenly appears. In Hebrew, it's very clear that seraph or seraphs, there are 2, it's a plural term there, seraphim. So they don't hold the sword. You put a seraphim and the sword to guard the entrance. So if you want a correct picture, of course, in this picture, if you go up, you'll see seraphim with a sword. But in the Bible, and there are no pictures in the Bible, there is, of course, the image which you're supposed to have is 2 seraphims and the rotating flaming sword, all on its own. I mean, multi-layered defense. So, it's you cannot get there. That's the message. Yes?
At some point, there's a transition from God talking directly to people to God talking through messengers.
Angels, yes.
Um,
It's,
when that happened?
at some point in the Bible, there's a transition from God talking directly, face to face, as he talked to Adam and Eve, to God sending messengers. Okay, we do know the following thing, that these entire collection of books, except Deuteronomy, at least for a second, was composed from multiple sources. There was a great German biblical scholar, Julius Wellhausen, who in 1870s came up with the source hypothesis, sort of identifying different sort of sources of Pentateuch, and particularly Genesis. And what he noticed is that the source which he called J source, which is commonly known as Yahwist, God always talks face to face. In a priestly source, angels appear. He, being a German professor in the 19th century, decided that means that J source is more ancient and priestly sources later. Basically, dating of sources nowadays is utterly compromised. We cannot date sources.
There is a distinction. Like in the when during Passover, when you tell the story, one of the prayers specifically said that God is saying, "I took you out of Egypt,
Yes.
not the cherub, not the seraph, but it was
Yes.
me."
Yes.
So, like both ways of communication appear like in
Yes, yes, because what actually happened, the person who composed these books took multiple sources and did this. And it's self-evident. I mean, the easiest way you could see that is read something like the story of Noah. It has multiple parallel sections. Does it happen like this? No, it happened like this. It was raining for so much. No, it was raining for so much. There are two parallel sources. And the guy who was putting things together was unbelievably honest. He said, I'll preserve both. It's like what he did with creation stories. But there he kept them side by side. With Noah's story, he does this. But they're truly multiple sources for same narratives. You see repetitions, by the way, in the story of Exodus. You see sort of repetitions of the same things happening slightly in different language. Why? Because again, when they were composing Exodus, whomever, I mean the final editor, he wanted to preserve, he was really very good. He said, I cannot throw that away. I have to keep both accounts. So, but the official sort of the Wellhausen idea of sort of the priestly source started introducing angels, and they appear in Genesis, right? Sort of, it's literally sort of the, in many respects, many modern scholars, in 20th century, the greatest Genesis or Pentateuch scholar, or one of the greatest, is a German Lutheran theologian, Gerhard von Rad. He actually claimed that the J source is the most sophisticated source, even if it's earlier. Right? Sort of, it's not the idea of God talking face to face. It's not because of primitive ideas, but quite the opposite, because of the highly sophisticated theology. There is a big field of study now. What is the thing to do? Never mind these books. Do not read von Rad, do not read Gunkel, do not read all of these great scholars. They are, I mean, Wellhausen, they are great. And in many respects, at some point, I learned enormous amount from them. But before you read scholars, you need to know the text. This is, we live in this remarkable age of biblical illiteracy, especially, amazingly enough, among our southern parts. People read, as I said, chapters and verses. What you need to learn is to read the narrative, the book. Right? And then you figure out what's the meaning. But do not, again, all these editions terribly have these numbers. I wish you could just run grep or something, just eliminate all the numbers. Put them just as a text, as if you're reading. I mean, Dickens has no numbers. So far, yes. But, I mean, the whole thing that there has been an effort for many centuries to make Bible, to sacralize it. And we need to desacralize, I mean, in order even to have a conversation about it. Sort of, if Asaf and I want to talk, we need to view it not as a sacred object, but as a book. Right? So the moment it becomes a sacred object, we start hitting each other with a sacred object, which this is not a good thing, guys. We'll get to that. But, I mean, one of the goals of civilization is that we could talk, that we stop, we could have a conversation. For that, I think it's actually now, with all this, religion is becoming very important in a bad sense. Right? Because, we talk about religious wars, religious conflict. I mean, I thought when I was young that these things were in the past. And right now we're smack in the middle of religious wars in 21st century. We have to learn to read texts. Because if you read text, you could start talking. Right? I mean, I'm very tempted, I probably will not do it, but to put a lecture on Quran. I mean, it's not part of the Western story. But it's important that we could all talk, together. And, yes?
Does the concept of the different aspects of God, like the Holy Trinity, start in the Old Testament, or is that a later thing?
Okay. Or does Trinity appear in the Old Testament? Yes, for Christians. Yes, for me. Right? This is the thing which we have to understand, that there is a theological interpretation of the text, which is different. I mean, which is different. And I have to understand that. I have to literally sort of study it. We cannot split each other. You cannot sort of separate yourself as believer and scholar. But in some sense, you have to. I have to know that certain things which clearly appears to me, there are what theologians call vestiges of the Trinity, signs of the Trinity, throughout the Old Testament. But I see them. Asaf doesn't see them. This is fine. Right? We have to learn to distinguish our theology from, the Bible is the wonderful thing, especially, Old Testament, we do all agree, at least even Muslims agree, that it's an important book, important text. Eventually, I hope to convince my Jewish friends that they should read New Testament. They don't have to believe it, but not knowing it, it's crazy, living in Christian world for 2,000 years and not reading the text is silly, pardon me. But I'm not trying to convert anyone to anything, by the way. I'm trying to, when I tried this course, to do it in an as objective way, just respecting all the traditions, Hindu. We don't have Muslims, unfortunately, but I wish we did. They have a very important presence in the world, and I think we need to learn from them, of them. But, everybody, what I'm just trying to say right now, we can read the Bible. It's a wonderful book. And then there are theological interpretations, of, yes, so there are theological interpretations. To me, obviously, as a Christian, Old Testament clearly points to Christ, but not to Joseph. And this is, he has to live with me, I have to live with him. And could we be friends? We are, right? So this I think is the central point, is that we need to learn that we could be friends while we even disagree on the very fundamental, maybe most fundamental things. But we still have to be friends. So this is of course it's my dream. It's not true. It's not nowhere close to being true. No, it's true for us and me, but you know what but it's a tragedy. I literally, I'm old man, I'm soon will be dead, and I think about my children, my grandchildren, living in this world where, we still hate each other, kill each other, refuse to understand each other. And it's terrible. We have to learn to live together. Will we? Well, again, I read you what it says, and this is how we are. So the chances are not very good, but we have to strive. We have to strive. This is sort of, it has to, what I'm trying to convince you guys that we stand for something. We're not just ants. Even if you don't believe in God, you still should distinguish yourself from the dead. We are special. I mean, there was, I was planning to use this quote toward the end of the course. There's a great, who knows them, if they live long enough. So there's a great American writer, William Faulkner, and when he was given Nobel Prize, he made this wonderful speech, look it up, where he said, the man will endure. We have to hope that we are special, and somehow as men, as Adam, we will endure. Sort of we somehow will, it's hard. It's hard, so. What could I say? Life is hard, but this explains partially why I'm teaching this course. To peace on earth, all of that, But justice for all. I think justice for all is a wonderful, wonderful goal. So we'll get to that. We'll get to justice for all. Not today. But I will not. No, I'll not teach. I'll talk about it. I cannot teach. It's basically most things your mother's taught you already, so you have to just recognize whatever good things your mother's taught. This is not an original thought. G.K. Chesterton. Yes, he was. All right, guys, thank you.